In 2010, a bloody hostage took place at the Carino Grandstand. The crisis led to the deaths of 8 Hong Kong nationals. This tragic incident has ignited political turmoil between the Philippines and Hong Kong. The Hong Kong government has been demanding for a state apology from no less than President Benigno Aquino III himself. But the president is quick to decline. As a result of Aquino's refusal to apologize, the Hong Kong government has recently canceled visa-free entry for Filipino officials and diplomatic passport holders going to Hong Kong. This state sanction is feared to affect holders of regular passports in the long run. In 2013, the Philippine government offered a compensation package to the victims of the hostage crisis, while Manila Mayor Joseph Estrada even volunteered to apologize, but both efforts were rejected by the Hong Kong government. Amid this tension, almost 200,000 overseas Filipino workers in Hong Kong fear for their lives and safety. Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. It's plain to see that President Benigno Aquino III has no plans of apologizing to Hong Kong over the bus hostage crisis in 2010. This is even after Hong Kong scrapped the visa-free arrangement for Filipino diplomats and government officials visiting there. Now, tonight, we'll weigh in the pros and the cons of that government decision. So we ask tonight, should the Philippines apologize to Hong Kong over the Manila bus hostage crisis in 2010? Good evening, I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and this is Opposing Views. Joining us tonight in our discussion is Attorney Harry Roque, Director of the Institute of International Legal Studies, UP Law Center. Good evening, Attorney Harry.
Good evening, Rod.
Yeah, what are your quick thoughts on this? Give us a summary of your position on this topic.
Well, I have always maintained that we are duty-bound, under international law to make the apology. It is a cardinal principle of international law that where there is a breach of an international obligation and the breach is perpetrated by individuals whose acts can be attributed to the state, a state there can then incur responsibility for an internationally wrongful act. And as a consequence, not only must we cease and desist from the unlawful act, we must make reparation, restore the status quo ante if possible. If no longer possible, then we have to pay compensation. To the extent that it will extinguish all the consequences of the illegal act. There is also a need to make satisfaction, and that usually takes the form of an apology. So this is not a policy option for the Philippine government. This is a duty under international law which we have to comply with, because in the Constitution, we have recognized that generally accepted principles of international law form part of the laws of the land.
All right. Now, on the opposing side, the Caloocan City 2nd District Representative Edgar Erice. Congressman Egay, good evening.
Good evening, Attorney Rod. Good evening, Attorney Harry.
Now, your views on this, you're obviously taking the opposing side. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I don't think it's the fault of the Filipino people. And I think we should support our leader on his stand against the demand of a foreign country.
All right. Now, obviously, this is a topic that has sparked a lot of conversation on social media and even in barbershops and coffee shops. And a lot of I hear a lot of people who say, why not say sorry? It's just one word. And of course, there's some people who say, why would you say sorry? Now, all right. Now, the premise though of saying sorry or apologizing means that someone is at fault. So I'll throw the first question to you, Congressman Egay. Was the hostage crisis our country's fault?
I don't think so. It's a fault of one deranged individual. And there might be some lapses in the operations, but it happened in many countries. For example, in Tiananmen Square, we have a Filipino doctor who was killed by a terrorist, Chinese terrorist, and I think there must be a security lapse. Nakarating na ako dyan sa Tiananmen Square, sobrang higpit ng security nan, but
and there was no apology.
No apologies, no compensation.
Nothing. All right.
Nothing.
Now, Attorney Harry, is it our country's fault, this whole hostage crisis?
It is, no? Rolando Mendoza may have been deranged, but the reality is he was still a state organ. He was a member of the PNP, albeit suspended, no? And moreover, you know, the death of the hostages was not just because of Rolando Mendoza. It was because we bungled the entire rescue operation. In fact, there was a committee formed by the president himself, headed by Secretary Laila de Lima. She recommended that criminal charges be filed against Mayor Lim, against General Verzosa, against then the Undersecretary Rico Puno. And of course, the charges were never filed, but
I think they were reversed by Malacanang.
concern. I mean, how would you feel if you are a Hong Kong national? The Philippine officials themselves said that there was gross negligence for which criminal charges must be filed. They were never filed. We promised them compensation. We never paid compensation. And yet, at this point, all that they want is an apology. We're still withholding it. If we did not come up with that report of Secretary de Lima, perhaps we can say that there was no basis for an apology because there was no fact of fault or negligence on our part. No? But the report of de Lima says otherwise.
All right. The president has said almost everything other than the word sorry or apologize. Now, he, through his secretary, the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs, and as well as himself, he would say words like regret, you know, and to some extent, of course, they feel for the families. But the word sorry or apologize apology is not there. Now, so my question to you, Attorney Harris, is apology necessary, or has he really fulfilled what needs to be fulfilled in this
Yes,
case?
it is, no? Because under the law on state responsibility, an apology is a form of satisfaction. Now, it's not just the Philippines that should apologize. I represent, for instance, the comfort women, no, who were raped during World War II, and until today, we're still fighting for Japan to officially apologize for the fact that they raped these people in times of armed conflict. No? It's different when you make an apology under international law, because that is a very clear instance of an admission that you breach an international obligation and that you're complying with your duty, no? Because you breach that obligation by making satisfaction in the form of an apology. And I think that's what worries policymakers, that it will have legal ramifications. But the only legal ramification here is the payment of compensation anyway. And recall that not too long ago, there was a big brouhaha also over a fisherman. One fisherman who was killed in Taiwan. No? Initially, we also refused to apologize until they stopped issuing visas to Filipinos in Taiwan. And eventually, what did we do? We also issued the apology and paid compensation. So are we going to wait for more drastic action on the part of Hong Kong before we apologize?
All right. All right,
I think
Congressman Egay, is an apology necessary?
The Taiwan situation is different because there was finding, and it was appealed by Malacanang. They accepted the findings. While in this case, DOJ findings are, we might consider this an internal matter. So
Or recommendatory?
recommendatory. So
Yeah.
Malacanang did not accept it. So the president ought to stand by what he believes.
So you feel, though, that an apology is definitely not necessary? We should
I
go
don't think
that
so.
route.
I don't think so.
And is it because of, since Attorney Harry has already mentioned it already, is it because of the legal
I'm not
repercussions?
really into, I am not an expert in foreign relations, nor even, I'm not a lawyer. So I cannot say whether we have a legal obligation. I cannot say that. Pero yung presidente naman natin, I think he has enough experts in the foreign department. I think they have more information than us. And I think we must rely on their decision.
Now, going beyond the need for apology or maybe even semantics, some people are even saying it's just semantics, di ba? It's like saying, if you go to a wake, I'm sorry for your loss. It's not the person who's saying it is not at fault of the death, but I feel sorry. So a lot of people are saying, just say that we're sorry for your loss.
Yes.
Diba? Now,
I think
however,
the president
yes,
has already said that. In effect, maybe
we regret that it
he
happened.
regret or he's sorry for what happened.
Yes,
but we cannot
say
apologize.
sorry as it's our fault.
Yes.
Now, let's go a step further. Do you think that with the president's refusal to apologize, will this have a major effect on our OFW staying there? Obviously, they're already clamoring for that apology.
I don't think that the Hong Kong government wouldn't dare touch the OFWs because they need the OFWs more than we need them.
Yeah. Do you
That's
think,
my
though,
position.
Harry, do you think that the fact that they will not touch them, of course, maybe that's a criminal act if they touch them, but it could affect them, right?
Well, there's already pending legislation banning the entry of Filipino workers into Hong Kong, which was what was similarly done in Taiwan. No? And the difference, of course, is right now in Hong Kong, there's only a threat.
Yeah.
Taiwan actually effected it, no? And actually said, we will not accept Filipino workers anymore. Now, it's true, I don't think it will happen overnight.
Yeah.
But anyone who's been to Hong Kong will observe that Indonesia now probably has equal number of its nationals working as domestic helpers in Hong Kong. No? So it's not absolutely true that we have become indispensable to them because there's an alternative market now for the kind of labor that we provide in Hong Kong, and that is from Indonesia. Of course, our comparative advantage is we speak English a bit
Yes.
better.
Yeah.
But in the long run, if this crisis continues, I think just to prove a point, they could just do it in the same way that Taiwan did. And remember, it's not as if they don't know what happened to Taiwan. They know that the most sensitive point as far as the Philippines is concerned is its overseas Filipino workers. No? So if we continue this hard line of refusing to apologize, come on. The people who will have to suffer for it are those who are making under 20,000 to feed their families here, all because we refuse to apologize. Now, I don't understand why there's such a stubborn refusal because the president has already said that we regret the incident and they may have been lapses. Okay? They're just afraid, perhaps, of how much they may have to pay by way of compensation. But you're talking of 8 individuals.
Is there a precedent, though, that where a government, for example, let's say international law, no? Is there a precedent whereby a country, for example, said sorry for a particular act, and then they were deluged with a lot of cases or legal cases or a lot of claims?
The precedents are there to show that if you make satisfaction by way of an apology and you pay compensation, that's the end of it. Because the remedy under international law is called reparation, which is restoration of status quo ante. But when there's someone who has died, there's no way you can restore the status quo ante. You can only pay compensation for it. No? So it's not as if we can't afford the compensation for 8 individuals as well. If we were able to afford 1 in Taiwan, multiply that by 8, I think the cost anyway, in terms of remittances derived by the OFW, will far outweigh the amount of compensation that we will be paying them. And mind you, I don't think they will ask for millions and millions of US dollars in compensation. What's more important now is a public statement that we are at fault. And if you're a victim, and I'm talking about human rights law now, if you're a victim, sometimes it's more important to get an apology than the monetary compensation. And take note, this is something that even the victims of the Maguindanao massacre have been asking from this government. And the reply to is, we will not apologize because the regime was not responsible for the massacre. Forgetting the fact that even if you were not the regime that was responsible for it, every single one accused of the killing is still a state agent. No? And therefore, it is still an obligation of the state to pay compensation and apologize to those whose right to life were violated.
All right. Thanks so much, Attorney Harry. We'll take a short break. Meanwhile, join the discussions online. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/SolarOpposingViews. Follow us also on Twitter at opposing_views. Use the hashtag OVHKApology. We'll be right back after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views. We have with us Attorney Harry Roque and Caloocan City Representative Edgar Erice. Our debate question for tonight: should the Philippines apologize to Hong Kong over the Manila bus hostage crisis in 2010? Congressman Egay, let's go to the sanctions. Of course, we know right now that Hong Kong has suspended a free visa status for our diplomats there and those the government officials who go to Hong Kong visa-free. Do you think these sanctions, and we, of course, we're hearing other possible economic sanctions, do you think that these sanctions are way too much?
No, I don't think that it matters kasi yung gumagamit naman ng official passports, konting-konti lang yan.
Yeah.
I can
yeah.
even go to Hong Kong tonight, use my regular passport.
All right. So you think it doesn't matter? So do you think the sanctions are not,
No,
are not too much?
it's more of parang ang tingin ko binubully tayo eh.
All right. Okay.
It's more of bullying.
Yeah.
They are demanding for an apology and they want an apology from the president.
Yeah,
Maybe next time they would want the Southwest Philippine Islands.
Do you think, Harry, this is a case of bullying, or do you have a point here?
Well, it would be bullying if they did not have a legal basis to ask for the apology. But my objective assessment is they do. Now, I would also hasten commingling the issue of the West Philippine Sea with Hong Kong, no? Because Hong Kong is an autonomous region from China. They have their own basic law. And like the Philippines, they're concerned about what mainland China could possibly do to them. No? And their number one worry is if China reneges on the promise that they will not touch their autonomy, so to speak. No?
Yeah.
So although
So
they are part
they're
of
also-
China,
they're also
yes,
concerned of
they're
China.
also very
Yeah.
concerned. And that's why
Yeah.
the interest in the West Philippine Sea is if China becomes aggressive in this issue, then China could very well ignore their promise to them of autonomy and become aggressive and march also across their borders, no? And claim you're now part of mainland China. No? So I think from a point of view of policy, we can even have Hong Kong as our ally. As in fact, why do you think the interest on the South China Sea in Hong Kong is very, very strong? No? The interest is there because whatever China does to the Philippines, they could do to Hong Kong as well. These are people who are spending sleepless nights on the possibility that they will be forced to live under conditions similar to mainland China. No? And of course, no resident of Hong Kong has ever had a chance to live under Chinese rule, mainland China's rule. No?
Now, as according to Congressman Egay, at least to him, the sanctions that were given by Hong Kong doesn't really impact so much. No? As you said, you can probably go to Hong Kong tonight with your with your Philippine passport, your ordinary passport. But should we worry that the sanctions of Hong Kong get worse?
Well, certainly, no. In diplomatic language, although this particular form of sanction does not mean much, no, because anyway everyone has regular passport. The reality is the message is we could take more aggressive sanctions. Of course, everything will be peaceful, but prepare for more serious sanctions if you ignore our demands. No? And again, I will repeat what Taiwan did. It started with an information, a statement that we will not allow Filipino laborers to enter Taiwan if we don't pay compensation and apologize. And they carried out the threat. No? So Hong Kong, in a not so subtle way, is saying, think about what your economic interests are. Think about your interests right now of having visa-free entry into the Crown Colony, and consider if you want to lose that because of your failure to apologize.
All right, Congressman Egay, do you think it will get worse? Do you think Hong Kong can really afford to, I guess, ban Filipinos there and require visas? Do you think it will be bad
worse,
for them as
but
well?
I think the government is preparing for that.
You think it could get worse?
Yeah.
And in what ways is the government preparing for that?
Maybe, of course, we because I think
Because when work permits get a bit difficult and
yes,
and,
because
and,
I think at the moment the Hong Kong government cannot afford to lose the OFWs.
so that
the
you think that all right. So you feel that they won't reach that point?
Yes,
right.
I don't think that.
Harry, do you think realistically
afford
do you think they'll put out that sanction of
They-
They
requiring
will have
visa
to
for-
prepare. They will
Yeah.
have to prepare for an alternative source of OFWs.
which you feel they're not prepared.
They're not prepared right now.
Well,
do
again-
you think that they're reasonably or possibly? Do you think that they can impose this?
Again, we should learn from history. And again, I point to Taiwan. In Taiwan, we had two incidents already. One during the time of President Erap involving PAL, and of course, the latest incident on the fisherman. And in both instances, we thought the first time around was, entry of Philippine aircraft to Taiwan. No? The first time around, we said, well, they would not cancel flights to Taiwan from Manila because that's foolhardy. They did. Second time around, we said, well, they cannot afford to stop issuing visas because in Taiwan, the Filipinos are more strategic because they're working in factories, not just as domestic helpers, but they did.
Okay,
so anything is possible in
Anything's
the
possible
realm
in
of,
Switch, okay.
realm of diplomacy.
All right.
Of course, they'll have to pay for it because they will not have helpers who are as cariñosa as Filipinos. But what they need are individuals to man their homes as they work, and if it has to be taken over by Indonesians, they will allow it.
Let me throw a side question. It's not really, to some extent, it's related to our topic, but it doesn't answer the question of should Pinoy apologize. Manila Mayor and former President Erap offered his own apology. Do you think that that would be sufficient?
Well, the problem is the apology of Erap Estrada is not an apology that they want. Number one, they feel that it was the PNP that botched the rescue effort in the first place. And Mayor Estrada has nothing to do with the PNP. So they want at least someone connected with the national government.
National government. All right.
Number two, Mayor Estrada also apologized also because of his domestic political concern. He wants to highlight the fact that Mayor Lim, his predecessor, was recommended to be amongst those charged criminally by De Lima. No? And he wants to emphasize that, in fact, Mayor Lim, his political opponent, was largely responsible for this fiasco because he took it upon himself to supervise the police operations at that time. No? So this is actually a very political move on the part of Erap Estrada, which in my mind will not be acceptable to Hong Kong because he is not the competent authority to apologize. My proposal, if the President really does not want to apologize, then let the Secretary of Foreign Affairs or the Secretary of the ALG formally apologize, coupled with the payment of compensation. If there is someone, a presidential alter ego, to make that apology, I don't think they can complain because an act of an alter ego is always an act of the President.
Right, okay. So do you think Congressman Egay,
Operational control over the Philippine National Police in the local level is handled by the
local government?
local government. So there's
so-
someone to apologize, then it must be the operational head
of that city?
bungled
Now, do you think under these circumstances, former president and now Manila Mayor Erap, his apology, do you think that should be sufficient, especially since he's a former president anyway?
Oh,
do you think that plays any
The local government,
Yeah.
in effect, the local
Anyway.
government bungled the operations.
Yeah,
Because,
it's the local government, you think?
Yes,
So you think that should be sufficient?
that should be sufficient.
All right. Now, is compensation enough? You think the fact because there was compensation, I think for one of the victims. I think to the tune of 2.2 million.
President Erap once announced that,
that
he's
you're willing no?
collecting
money to
donations to give it.
Do you think
to the
compensation
victims.
is enough? Here's the compensation. No more apology. Here's the compensation. Do you think that is sufficient? A sufficient sorry? Or a sufficient apology?
President Erap has already apologized as
Yeah.
the chief executive
As the
of
father
the
of
city,
that-
the
of that city,
operational head of the local police.
Yeah.
Then is going to pay compensation. So I think that's more than enough.
Now, Harry, do you think that, let's say, if we just pay compensation, let's say under as you said, under international law, compensation is required. Do you think that by paying that, no more apology, okay, here it is, but no sorry?
You know, my clients, the comfort women, had the same dilemma because Japan, instead of paying officially compensation from their coffers, collected money from private sources and called it the Asian Women's Fund and said, here, accept this compensation for victims of mass rape. And my clients said no, because they're not interested in money. No. In their case, the statement of the Japanese government was the comfort women were prostitutes. So they were saying, if we accept the money, then we are acknowledging that by accepting private money, that we in fact wanted money for sex. No? So you can imagine also from the perspective of the victims, it's not just compensation that they want. They want at least
an acknowledgement,
that their loved ones were victims of an injustice. And possibly when you have that, and that is why the official term for apology in international law is satisfaction, is as soon as you have satisfaction, then as part of restorative justice, then you can move on with your lives.
All right, we'll take a short break. More on the issue of apology to Hong Kong when we come back. You're watching Opposing Views. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views on the Solar News Channel. Our guests for tonight, Attorney Harry Roque and Caloocan City 2nd District Representative Egay Erice. Our question, should the Philippines apologize to Hong Kong over the Manila bus hostage crisis in 2010? Now, Attorney Harry, I'll throw this question to you. Other major, I guess, crimes that were committed. Now, let's take, for example, 9/11. Right, 9/11. You have several, I guess, hijacked planes. They crashed, and 3,000 people, more than 3,000 people died of different nationalities. Right? But from that incident, we never heard, at least as far as I know, never heard the U.S. president at the time, George W. Bush, apologize to all those nationalities who were affected. How does this differentiate from that? Of course, we can also assume that there was a breach in security in the airports and the airlines. So there was also, I guess, a fault. There was fault on the part of government officials.
Well, the difference is one of the two elements required for international responsibility is lacking, and that is the perpetrators of the violation of the right to life were not acting for and behalf of the state, and that their acts could not be attributed to the state. Now, having said that, it's not true that the issue of 9/11 is done and over with, because some of the victims have filed suit against the federal government precisely for negligence, and it's ongoing. I'm not even sure if there's already some kind of compromise reached with some of them, but what I am definite about is, yes, they are alleging negligence in the security on the part of the federal agents that maintain the airport, and they want to hold them liable for tortious conduct.
Is there a demand for apology for the federal government?
Well, in the case of the civil cases, they want actual damages. And in the U.S., when they ask for compensation, it's the kind of damages that the Philippines might worry will be asked by Hong Kong nationals, because they ask damages in the hundreds of millions in the U.S. So when you get hundreds and millions by way of exemplary damages, who needs an apology?
That's right. All right. Now, Congressman Egay, your
Same
thoughts
way
on this?
with Major Mendoza, or the perpetrator. He's already suspended during that time, so we cannot say that he's an agent of government at the time of.
Yeah, but I think the discussion is more on the police who were there, who botched the whole rescue. No?
Well,
The negligence.
as I
and
said,
I
in
guess
China,
criminal
I
culpability.
think there are lapses in the Tiananmen Square incident where one Filipino doctor died.
Yeah, let's go to that. There are instances, Harry, that
Yes.
that in China, for example, there were crimes committed against Filipino nationals. So can we make the same case or same?
Again, in the
comparison?
case of the Tiananmen incident, the second element on who violated the right to life is the act of that person attributable to the state? And if it's committed by a terrorist, how can you attribute it to a state? Perhaps you can say there was negligence in preventing the act of terrorism.
Yes. Perhaps even
but
criminal negligence.
The standard is very clear under international law. It's the nearest claim, that the action must be so egregious, it must amount to a scandal, it must be gross neglect of duty, And as far as the Hongkong nationals are concerned, Laila de Lima concluded there was gross neglect of duty. So we seem to have completely satisfied 100% the test under international law on when a state will incur responsibility. Now take note that the fact that Rolando Mendoza was suspended does not mean he has ceased to become a state organ. Until he was actually terminated, he's remained a state organ. And under international law, it does not matter what your rank is in government. The decision of an MTC is equally binding as a decision of the Supreme Court. The decision of a street patrol cop is equally binding as the head of the PNP himself.
Now, let's go back to the relations now, the Philippine-China relations, which I'm sure to some extent comes into play here. A lot of people are saying they're just focusing on this particular issue. But there are certain dynamics between our country. It's not like two countries who hardly deal with each other. No? This is we all know about the dynamics that are going on. A little bit of fireworks going on the side between the Philippines and China. Do you think that is a factor? Do you think that's coming to play in this whole non-apology stance of Pinoy?
Well, I'm afraid that will be a consequence of what is happening right now. My position is Hong Kong wants to be viewed as autonomous from China. They have not been adopting completely the entire foreign policy of China. They appear to be more sympathetic to us on the issue of West Philippine Sea because China could just walk across their borders and say you're now officially part of mainland, forget this autonomy. No?
Yeah.
But by refusing to apologize and by making statements that will further add coal to a burning fire, I'm afraid we're pushing the Hongkies to side completely with mainland China, no, on this issue. No? Right now, the relationship is very strained. It's really a fear that the mainland China will renege on the promise that they will be left to run their own affairs. No?
So a major fear on the part of Hong Kong.
Correct,
China,
no?
yeah.
But we're actually giving now mainland China an opportunity to become closer to the leadership of Hong Kong and to espouse the view of a Hongki national.
Now, do you think Congressman
I don't
Lisa
think I don't think that the Hong Kong can even defy or even be sympathetic, show sympathy to the Philippines, because I think China is in complete control of Hong Kong. Maybe in running the affairs of the state, but in issues against the Philippines, I think Hong Kong will always be for China.
So do you think though that the dynamics between the two countries is coming to play here? Do you think that Pinoy, if it was any other country,
Yes,
do you think that Pinoy might have apologized? Because it's China and it's
No. I don't.
Probably views
I don't think
China
so.
as Hong Kong.
President has his reasons, and he has more information than us.
All right.
So I would rather take side with my president.
Now, do you think, Harry, that this is just a case of semantics? Do you think that perhaps we're really just splicing the whole issue up to different, many pieces, when in fact the apology is already there. It's just the way Hong Kong interprets it. Do you think that it's really just semantics? It's just a play of words?
I don't think it's semantics. No, I think the Hong Kong government knows what it wants. It wants the technical meaning of a definition under international
Right,
law.
the legal definition of
They
of
want a
an
legal apology as a
Yeah.
consequence of the commission of an internationally wrongful act. No? Now, but what I think is wrong as far as the Philippine government is concerned is a failure to appreciate that every killing comes an obligation. No? Now, this obligation actually is not just because it's part of the Articles of State Responsibility. No? This is part of human rights law. There were individuals whose right to life were violated here, and the perpetrators of the violation are state agents, no? Directly and indirectly. No? Now, when a person, and it doesn't matter what their nationality is, no, becomes a victim of a major human rights violation, they are entitled as a matter of law and as a matter of right to apology and compensation. And that is why we should apologize not just to the Hong Kong nationals, we should apologize also to the Maguindanao victims, we should apologize to every single Filipino who is made victim of extralegal killing at the hands of state agents.
Right. Now, Congressman Negay, there was no other investigation conducted other than the one conducted by Secretary De Lima, right?
Yes.
So, and she came out with.
Yes,
came
and
out with,
I think
with her
Malacanang
findings and suggestions.
reviewed the recommendation.
Yeah, reviewed and turned it around. Is that kind of
Yes,
kind of a conflict of interest there? Because
They did not
obviously
agree.
it was.
They did not agree. So I don't think that the president should apologize to something that
He disagreed.
he disagreed.
Yeah, he disagreed to a recommendation or decision of one of his alter egos,
Yes.
the Secretary of Justice.
Yes.
But of
I
course,
think
it
there's
directly
a
affected him.
process in the palace. They have a process of reviewing
Yeah.
things.
What do you think of Attorney Harry's suggestion that it should be a representative of the president, let's say the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, who should apologize
Well,
on behalf of the president?
I think the opinion of the president is the national government
Was not at fault.
was not at fault. The Filipino people was not at fault. So
No, all right.
There's no need
All right,
for an apology.
Let's review this. When the Congressman Ega says the Filipino people are not at fault, is that different from saying the state or the government is at fault?
Well, you see, we have to be very precise about it.
Yeah.
No? International law says that where it is a state that breaches a norm of international law through an act of an individual whose acts could be attributed to the state, it becomes a state obligation. So
Therefore,
here,
the government-
clearly, the Filipino people did not do anything against the Hong Kong national. I did not do anything against
Yeah,
them.
we
The
did.
200,000 people who are living in Hong Kong who are Filipinos did not do anything against the 8 hostages. It is a state organ and other state organs that were responsible for the death, and that is why it is the obligation of the state, of the Philippine state, to make compensation, pay compensation, and to apologize. Now, let me go back to the fact that the report of De Lima was ignored. Now, that will not affect the evidentiary or the evidence gathered by Secretary De Lima. Remember, she actually conducted hearings. She conducted marathon hearings, called witnesses, called for forensics evidence, and on the basis of all evidence gathered by her, made the conclusion that we are at fault. You can't ignore that because she had the benefit of seeing the evidence. What happened was there was a political decision not to accept that.
It was a political
but
decision.
You cannot ignore the physical and testimonial evidence that were gathered that became the basis for the conclusion of the Secretary of Justice.
Under international law, what weight does that have? The findings of the
that's
Secretary?
sufficient.
Yeah.
Sufficient evidence to conclude that the Philippine government breached an international obligation.
This
That
is not
sufficient.
Is this akin to yes?
Who will be the who will be the judge?
Well,
You're saying
you
that
see-
we breach. The president says no. Who will be the judge?
Well, it was actually, the judge here was the Secretary of Justice, who is a lawyer and who is the chief legal counsel of the Republic. No? Unfortunately, he's president, and that's why eventually he can overrule.
She cannot judge the president.
She cannot. No? But as a matter of law, we all know that the president is a non-lawyer. We all know that she is the cabinet portfolio holder of the Department of Justice.
But the
and her
president
views
does
should have been respected.
a legal counsel is also aided by the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Yes. So in your take is
I think the president is right.
the president is right because he's also aided by other people. All right.
But you see, we assume that the president rejected it.
That's why what I'm saying
politically,
if the position of Hong Kong government is that the Philippine government is responsible, and the Philippine government opinion is we are not responsible. Who will be the judge?
All right.
Well, we have basically a declaration against our interests when our Secretary of Justice recommended that these individuals be
And
charged.
that has weight, sir.
That has
All
weight.
right. All right. We're taking a short break again. Don't go away. When we come back, the result of our online poll on the issue and the final words of our guests. Stay tuned. You are watching Opposing Views. Welcome back. This is Opposing Views. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. And our guests, Attorney Harry Roque and Caloocan City 2nd District Representative Edgar Erice. Our debate question for tonight: should the Philippines apologize to Hong Kong over the Manila bus hostage crisis in 2010? And we're about to reach the tail end of the show. Now, we were discussing earlier about the creation of a legal liability. You feel, Harry, that we are legally liable. Now, let's talk about perhaps enforceability. We all know in law, no, on one hand, you have legal liability or decision that you're liable, but on the other hand, there's also the matter of enforceability. Is something like this, if assuming we have legal liability, how is it going to be enforced? Is it through international law?
Well, under international law, enforcement can take many forms. No? One of it will be a mere declaration that you're in breach of an international obligation. Another is any of the means specified under the UN Charter, any of the peaceful means. Another way is through diplomatic pressure. And I think Hong Kong is now applying diplomatic pressure to get what it wants. That's a form of enforcement mechanism. And you can't say it's illegal because it does not resort to the use of force, and they have not done anything that they are not entitled to do as a sovereign as well. So that's what's dangerous about international law. Unlike domestic law, where you have a problem, you bring it to court, under international law, you need the consent of both parties if you want to go to court. Now, if the Philippines really feels that it is not at fault for what happened, then bring it to an international court. Bring it to the International Court of Justice. But you can't just say, I'm not liable even if my Secretary of Justice said I am, and not do anything about it, not even issue an apology.
Now, do you think, though, this will reach the point that it will go to the International Court of Justice? And
I think it's the Hong Kong government should be the one
file
to file it because they are
Yeah.
the accuser.
Right. Correct. Do you think though it
If
has reached
they
a point?
file it and maybe the International Court of Justice can rule about it, then maybe the
Because
Philippines can reconsider its position.
But in this case, I think the government has made several pronouncements that it will compensate, right?
Yes, in
So-
terms of compensation,
Yeah, compensation.
there's no problem. But the apology,
Yes.
the apology
But
thing.
has there been, in your, as far as you know,
Because,
has there been an actual compensation of the victims?
I am not
Or
very
an offer?
sure.
A real
I'm
offer,
not
like
very
bring-
sure. I'm
bring
not
in
very
the-
sure about that.
You're not sure about
Very
that.
sure
But do
about
you think though that let's assume that it reaches the International Court of Justice? Do you think we'll win? Or
Well,
that-
it
that-
really depends on the
evidence.
evidences
Yeah.
to be presented by both parties.
Now, let's argue in the case of, I guess, in the matter of peace. For the sake of peace, alam mo naman tayo mga Pinoy, di ba? Para peace na. Para, ano, do you think just, even for that alone, just to buy peace, do you think that maybe not even an issue on the legality, but just to buy peace, do you think that we should do it?
Well, that's why I'm very surprised why there's such a big issue about an apology. We're a peace-loving people. And we're so agreeable as a people, Aapakapakan na nga tayo pa yung manunuyo. But in this instance, tayo naman talaga yung gumawa ng hindi tamang bagay, nahihirapan tayo humingi ng patawad. No? I think it's contrary to our culture as Filipinos, to stand our ground in the manner that we have been doing. No? Pero the point is, what will be the cost of this, this refusal to apologize, which I think is really just based on pride. No? There's 200,000 Filipinos who are not able to obtain livelihoods here in the Philippines and are working as modern-day slaves in Hong Kong.
So do you think it's just pride? It's not because we feel we have a legal position.
I think it's just pride that we are refusing, because Laila de Lima documented already why we're at fault.
Yeah.
So that should not be at issue anymore.
So,
If there's a political decision to ignore that, then that's the problem of the president, because the Secretary of Justice, meanwhile, is still Secretary of Justice. He still has full support on his Secretary of Justice, but he rejected the recommendation of his Secretary of Justice.
So there's a problem
That's
there.
his problem,
Okay, all right.
not Hong Kong's.
Congressman, do you think it's more because of pride that Pinoy is having this firm stance, or do you think that he feels we really have a legal basis not to apologize?
I think the president believes that it's not the state's
Obligation.
It's not the state's obligation. So, mahirap naman na humingi ka ng patawad kung hindi mo naman talaga nararamdaman na kailangan mo humingi ng patawad.
Yeah.
At hindi naman maganda na humingi ka
Sorry
ng
na.
patawad
Sorry na.
para lamang ika nga kung maling dahilan ang paghingi mo ng patawad.
So hindi applicable dito yung rule na parang sa misis natin, kunyari, may parang kahit na feeling natin, hindi natin kasalanan. Apologize na, sorry na lang.
So,
para to buy peace.
Habang buhay na tayo magsusorry niyan.
We don't want to be a... Yeah, well, going back there, Attorney Harry, do you think that parang, in a way, yun nga, what the point of Congressman, do you think parang we're always apologizing, we're always parang the one at fault, and in a way, it adds to a culture of parang being underdog all the time.
Yun nga, sinasabi natin for the benefit of our workers. Parang wala tayong
Dignity
believe sa mga workers natin that they are there because they are capable. They're
good.
doing something good for the
And not because
Hong Kong
not
people.
because the government is refusing
And not because the
government is not doing something or doing something. Do you think that's the case? I mean, at any rate, our OFWs they're great workers. Do you think that that's enough to really put this issue aside and let their skills speak for themselves?
Well, I have always been representing victims of human rights violations, and that is why I do feel for the victims of the Hong Kong Luneta fiasco. No? And to victims, sometimes the money does not matter.
Yeah.
To victims, what will put them at ease and finally at rest with the loss of their loved one is an acknowledgement that they were, in fact, victims to an injustice. An apology here is a legal obligation. it's not as if inapi tayo when they were asking for apology. No? Our own officials documented where we were at fault. The fact that we did not punish them for it is not the problem of the victims.
All right.
We have to apologize because otherwise our countrymen who may be victims of injustice may suffer the same fate. They will be victims of injustice and they will not get compensation and apology.
Okay, we have enough time for parting words, final words. Congressman Egay, how do we move forward to this? Anong tingin mong, I guess,
I think
process that
we
we
have
should
to
follow?
move forward by supporting the position of our
So
government.
as a country, we should support our president.
Sila ang may tamang mga impormasyon na maaring hindi natin alam at na maaring hindi na natin malaman ang mga bagay na ito.
Okay.
Pangalawa, marami na ring Pilipino ang naging biktima sa iba't ibang bansa, perpetrated even in Saudi, mga naririnig natin yung mga kababayan natin na bibictimize ng mga makapangyarihan. Pero wala tayong narinig
No demand for
na
apology.
isang,
All right. Okay.
na isang paghingi ng patawad.
Sige. All right. Thank you very much, Congressman Egay. Attorney Harry, your parting words?
Well, the Constitution says we adopt the generally accepted principles of international law as part of the laws of the land. We have a legal obligation to make an apology and to pay compensation. And we have a moral obligation to our nationals in Hong Kong to make sure that their plights will not be threatened by our refusal to apologize.
All right. Thank you very much, Attorney Harry.
My
And thank you
pleasure.
very much, Congressman Egay. Thanks to our guests, of course, Attorney Harry Roque and Caloocan City Representative Egay Erice. Now let's see the results of our online poll. Our question, should the Philippines apologize to Hong Kong over the Manila bus hostage crisis in 2010? Those who answered yes, 60%, yes, we should apologize. And those who answered no, 40%. And that's our opposing views for tonight. Tune in again next week for another bold and engaging discussion on the most relevant issues of today. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. Good night and God bless.